Hey there. Okay, so welcome back. So we know now that animating isn't just moving things around. So then, if it's not just moving things around, then what do I do, right? That's really the next question. Like, okay, so we saw my mom just move it from here to here, and I'm being told that that's not the right thing to do. What do I do past that? That's where the 12 principles of animation come in. So you saw that book that I showed you earlier that is just back there. There were two very skilled animators back in the day at Disney. They came out with that book, and in that book they go over what they called the 12 principles of animation. And we're going to go over those right now. I'm remember that these principles in general were created a long time ago. So what I'm gonna do is I'm literally just gonna type 12 principles of animation. And if you go to videos, you're going to see a video like right around here, most likely, called Squash and Stretch, the 12 Principles of Animation. I encourage you, this is typically what I show my students. This is a video where it breaks down basically all the principles. So on your own time, I encourage you to watch this. It looks like it might be this one as well. Yeah, it's this one right here. It's the very top one. It very nicely breaks it down. But in the meantime, I'll go ahead and I'll just break down them for you. Remember that these principles were made 50 years ago, and they were made specifically for 2D animation. Some of them don't apply, at least in my opinion, as much in today's kind of world with 3D animation as they did back then. But let's go over them. So the 12 principles of animation, the very first one is squash and stretch. So the idea of this, if you look at this demo right here, you can see it with a ball, how it squashes. So let's go ahead and demo this right here with our ball. So if we go something like this and we see this ball hit the ground, so let's say that it hits the ground on frame 20. Let's go ahead and give this, don't feel like you need to follow along at this point. This is just a demonstration. Cool. So we're going to go something like that. So the ball goes down here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, when it hits the ground on frame 20, the idea is that it's going to squash, right? So what I'll do here is I'll do something like this. This is where it hits the ground. And so I would squash it out like this, so that when it hits the ground, it goes boom. Oh, I forgot to key it. 1 second. There we go. Let's key that. There we go. And this one should be up here. I forget that I don't have auto key. And this one will be up here. There we go. Let's hit play. Now we've added a squash to our ball right there. If we wanted to go ahead and add stretch to this, where we would typically do it is we would typically add it somewhere around here. We'll get into this later, and we would add it somewhere like that, where we stretch the ball there, and then it goes back. So squash and stretch. The point of squash and stretch, it can get really, it can be simple or it can be really complex, but in a very basic way, it's to make things feel like they're not all like a brick. Even a baseball, there's a really good example of a baseball getting hit in slow motion, and when it gets hit really hard, the baseball itself actually squashes, and we often think of a baseball as really hard. Our bodies squash and stretch way more than we actually think. So we're going to add that. It's going to add a level of realism, and it'll also come into play when we start getting into the other principles of animation as well. So that's the basics of squash and stretch. Anticipation. So anticipation, what is anticipation? So a good way, I always use this demo actually, which is perfect. So like if you think of someone who, a golf one is also a good one. If you think of someone hitting a golf ball, They don't just go like this and then hit the ball, right? They have a big wind up like this, and then they swing back. It's usually a precursor to movement. You're basically telegraphing to the audience what you're going to do before you're going to do it. And if done correctly and you have the right amount of overlap as well, oftentimes the anticipation, you're going to hear me call it antic. So if you ever hear me say the word antic, that's the same as anticipation. Oftentimes the antic is actually more important than the action itself. If you set up your antic properly and you have the right overlap, you won't even need the action sometimes. A really good example is you can cut out this whole part where he's swinging, and if you have the wind up like this, and then you just have the follow through like that, people will know exactly what you are doing. So antic is a super important one of the most important, I would say, if not the most important. We can go into antics later, but generally there are two ways to do antics. Don't worry about this right now if you don't remember, but generally, like if I move left, I'll antic right? So oftentimes you antic in the opposite direction that you're going to move. So if I go up, I'll often antic down. So about 90% of the time you're going to antic in the opposite direction. There is a second way that we often antic, which is we let gravity pull us down. So about 10% of the time, instead of going the opposite direction, our antic will be to go down and then over. We let gravity pull us down. We use that momentum and taking us into our next action. Cool. So that is anticipation. Let's go to the next one, staging. This is one of those ones that I don't feel like relates really a lot to like educating students. General staging, I would say like 1/3, 2/3 rule. You might want to know, but I often don't think of that as animation training. So I'm overall going to skip this one because I don't find it to be super valuable. And same with this one, straight ahead action versus pose to pose. So this one really related to 2D animation. The general idea behind straight ahead action and pose to pose is that straight ahead action, you've all probably done it. So straight ahead action is where you take like a notebook like this and you drew that little stick figure like this on the bottom, and then you go to the next page and you draw a stick figure on the next page, and then the next page and the next page, and you flip it and see the movement. That's straight ahead, meaning you start on the first frame, second frame, third frame, fourth frame, and go from there. Pose to pose is basically you take the key poses of the action. So if my action is, hey guys, how's it going? I'm not gonna go, hey, I'm not going to do this frame, 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 then this frame, this. Like I'm going to go this frame, and then this frame. Those are my three key poses, which we'll get into later. And I'm going to do those poses first. I'm going to do the most important poses first. So like I said, that's more of a technique of animation, more of a principle. Follow through and overlapping action. So an easy way to think about follow through and overlapping action is like long hair or clothing. So like if I go like this, like I don't have a very loose shirt, but if I went like this, let's see, I go like this. What you just saw there was overlapping action, right? It's following through and it's overlapping. It's a good way to add to the realism of your shot, and it's a really fun technique once you learn how to do it properly in 3D. If you're anything like me, when I first learned how to do it, I got really carried away and everything was overlapping, and it didn't look right, but I had fun doing it. You can see here in Edward Muybridge. These are good books if you haven't ever read them or just looked at them. They break down like a horses and humans movement. So there's that. Slow in and slow out. I often refer to this as ease in, ease out. Students are notoriously bad at this. This is one thing that it takes students a long time typically to understand. The idea behind ease in and ease out, like I said, I'm gonna use the term ease in and ease out, is is objects not coming to a complete stop. So let's say something like right now, actually, this is a good example. The ball on the right is basically easing in and easing out to both of its moves. By default, the computer is typically going to ease in and ease out to everything. This one right here, you'll notice that this ball right here, if we look at spacing, which we haven't got into, you'll notice that this is really large spacing here, but this one is slowly easing in before it changes direction. Yes, so that is ease in and ease out. Arc. Arc is pretty basic, so I'm not going to go over it. It is really important. So arc is basically anything that goes like this. And instead of something that's linear, it's arc. So the arc and linear are the two things that you'll hear often me talk about, especially when we start getting into FK and IK. IK is typically going to give you linear movement. FK is going to give you arced movement. If you think of like Disney films, like the princess films, they do a lot of stuff on arcs. That they're very like arcy, like hey, ba-dum. So that's arcs. Secondary action. Secondary action is often confused with like overlapping action. People often say add some secondary action, and what they actually wanted was overlapping action or follow through like that. That is not what secondary action is. Secondary action is as let's say that I'm walking, and then I decide while I'm walking that I'm gonna take off my headphones. The secondary action there is going to be me taking off my headphones. Like if someone was walking and smoking, that would be their secondary action. If I'm bored like this, and I'm just sitting here, and then I go like this, this is going to be my secondary action, like a tap, a fidget, things like that. Secondary action. We won't be dealing much with this in this class. This often gets introduced when we get into acting more. Timing, another super valuable one. So antic and timing, I would say so far are the two most important ones that we've gone over. Timing is, if we break down timing right now, so timing, if we look at this one right here, timing is typically how long it takes in time. So right now it's taking basically 10 frames to go up and 10 frames to go down, right? So if I move this something like that, now it's taking 18 frames to go up and 18 frames to go down. So I just changed the timing. That's super important. Timing is not spacing, which we'll get into later. So timing is adjusting the actual time. Cool. Let's go into exaggeration. Exaggeration is one that again, we probably won't go into a lot in this class, if at all. Exaggeration usually comes in the more advanced classes. When you start, when you understand the other principles, then you can start exaggerating stuff. It usually comes into play with posing. So like if you have a pose that says, hey guys, like this, you may want to exaggerate that pose. So it's like, hey guys, like this. We can all imagine what that looks like. Exaggeration. Cool. Solid drawing, again, like I said, this is, from 50 years ago at 2D. Obviously, this one applies at 0 to us, so we can ignore this one altogether. Some students wonder, like, do you have to be a good draftsman, a 2D person, to be a good animator? And you don't. I'm not a very good draftsman, even though I have worked on, I worked on Curious George, the 2D one. That was a long time ago. But I'm actually not very good at drawing. There are some animators that are amazing at drawing, and they're great, and then there are some that are terrible at drawing. So it can go either way. Appeal. This one I feel like is, I don't know if it's really a principle, but basically in my mind when I read this, it's like make it good. The argument here would be like, oh, it's not about being good, it's about being appealing, because there is a difference between good and appealing. But appeal is often going to come into play with posing as well, something that we won't be dealing with too much in this class. Probably like at a squirrel test, there'll be some overlap when we start talking about rhythm and appealing rhythm. But yeah, Cool. And that is the 12 principles of animation. Don't worry if you didn't get all that. It's not a matter of like, I've got to know all 12 of these. The big ones to keep in mind is antic. Uh, and meanwhile, I didn't even see spacing here. I didn't see spacing, which is weird. So spacing, I'm going to go over this because I don't know why it didn't go over it. So the big ones here are antic, timing, and spacing. Spacing is one of the first things that we're going to go over in this class. Spacing is going to be the actual space between each frame. So if this ball is here on this frame, and then it's here on this frame, the spacing is a gap of like from here to here, right? It's a distance by space versus the actual time. So your spacing between these frames is this large. Now, if we look at the spacing between, say, the frames of this one, we can see that this is a much larger spacing between these frames. So this has larger spacing, that other one has smaller spacing. Cool. Okay, that is the 12 principles of animation. Okay, I'll see ya.